Ladies and gentlemen, in this video I want to talk about an old project which has been going on far too long, and I'm also going to revisit a video which I did a long time ago, and I decided to try it again and see what had happened in that time, see if the quality had changed and see if I had gotten better or not. So stay tuned for this one. Now, some time back, I did a video on painting in Jawz Grunta, and I really liked the video. However, the quality wasn't fantastic. Even some of the comments told me so as well, so I understood that. Now, I've gotten a little bit better, a little bit older, a little bit uglier, and I think I can do a little bit of a better job now. The other thing as well is this is part of a big army that I wanted to complete. Now, I'm not in love with Age of Sigmar anymore, so this army probably will be going up for sale at some point. However, I wanted to finish it. So this is painting an Jawz Grunta again. So we start off with a base prime of black, then with a zenithal highlight of white. Now this can be done with a rattle can, it doesn't have to be done with an airbrush. Mine was done with an airbrush, just for clarity's sake, but it can be done with a rattle can. This isn't massively important, you don't need an airbrush for this paint job. And we're going to start with Scarlet Red. Now I really like Scarlet Red because it's very vibrant, and it's that kind of idealistic red for me. It's not Blood Angels red where it's dark, it's that kind of closer towards orange red that, yeah, it just appeals to me. And we're going to paint this all over the armor panels. Pick and choose which ones you want, but basically the scheme is black and red, so we're giving off very kind of vibrant and warning tones here. Then we're going to come in with Watercolors Orange 3. Now this, we are going to dry brush on. Because red is quite tricky to highlight, we're going to dry brush on an orange and see if that will do the trick. On my previous video, I did dry brush again, or highlight it up with that, and I wanted to see if it still held true. It didn't go very far on this one, so stay tuned. I do fix it in a bit, but this can be an initial step if you want to get a sort of start that base layer of highlights in. Now we're going to use Gore Brown, and in this we are going to paint up all the fur. So this is a contrast paint, so put this on pretty thick, it'll do its own job, and you can basically slather this over it. The zenithal highlight will fix all of the things and basically give us all the details, so we don't have to do a lot of work here. It's just one big thick base layer. Now with that complete, we can move on to blocking in some other colours. So the shoulder pads and the other sort of contradicting colour in this is black with a blue highlight to it. So we're just going to paint in all the armour panels that were not red, and we're going to paint them all black. This starts giving off our solid block colours and understanding how the model is going to look after all of this. Now it should be said as well, when I was painting this one, I was taking more shortcuts than I did last time. I figured out there's more efficient ways of painting, and some things are just not necessary. So in this, it will not be as detailed as the other one. However, if you would like to see what the other one is like, go check the link. It's not as inglorious detail as this one, however, it's worthwhile. Now we're going to come in with Rakarth Flesh, and this we are going to dry brush over the fur. Now we can also dry brush the armour at the same time. As I said before, the orange didn't go that far, so the Rakarth Flesh will give us our initial point of getting a highlight colour on here. Dry brushing it is an easier way rather than trying to edge highlight all of those tiny little edges. It's not really worth it. Using Rakarth Flesh here, we can get a nice dry brush over everything, and it covers lots of steps, and it gives us our initial highlights for everything. Also, as well as to be said about the Gore Grunta's colour of this fur, what happened eventually in the army is lots of different Gore Gruntas had lots of different fur. As is true in nature, animals have different coloured furs all over the place, so that is the reason why the Gore Grunta's fur is different in this one to the other one. Then we come back in with our Watercolors Orange, and we'll dry brush over the Rakarth Flesh, and suddenly the orange is coming into life here. So, lesson learnt, if you ever want to dry brush, or if you ever want to highlight red with an orange, hit it with a dry brush of an off-white first, then come back in with the orange, and that gives a nice easy way of highlighting reds with an orange. Now we're going to use Caspian Blue from Scale Color, and we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to dry brush on the blue over the black / Rakarth flesh, and this just makes it life a lot easier rather than edge highlighting. It's again the same with the orange, is we just dry brush this on over the Rakarth flesh, and the blue stands out very prominently and gives us what we're after. As I said, since the time of doing the initial one, I've learnt a lot, and I've learnt some things are not necessary, so we can just get away with cheating like that. Now we're going to use Aquatic Blue, and we're going to lightly dry brush and give this a bit more of a highlight over the blues on the black shoulder pads. Blues over the black shoulder pads, it's weird. Anywho, this just gives us a slight gradient highlight, just to highlight up a bit more, get a little bit more punch into the black. Now we're going to be using Basilica and Grey, and this is going to go over all the trousers. Now before, what I did on the previous video is I used browns and I used various different things, and yeah, it does work if you can do the highlights. However, these contrast paints do allow you to cheat a lot. Now we're going to use Bugman's Glow, and we're going to paint over all the skin of the Gore Grunta itself, and I believe I used this one last time. It's quite a good method, it's tried and tested, so I'm not really going to argue with that one. I'm in an hour and about whether or not to paint the skin a different colour or something like that, just to diversify it a bit. However, it's a nice breakup of the model. You could do it that way, but I think this just gives it a little bit more. And the rest of the army's painted that way, so we're not going to adjust. Now we're going to use Druchii Violet, and this is just going to shade over all the skin colours. If anyone doesn't know, shading a skin colour with a purple is a very nice way of shading skin. It's a good way of getting a nice recessed shadow, and yeah, you don't have to resort to black and then think this looks weird. Purple is quite a nice colour to shade most things, to be honest with you. Now we're going to use Pallet Witch Flesh, and we are just going to paint all the leather straps. Now this is preparatory state. I can't even say that word again. This is a initial state? A precursor. We'll go with that. This is a precursor to the next colour, or the next, well, an area we're going to use, because we're going to use our good old friends contrast paints again, and putting a base layer down of a off-white or a white or something to that effect does assist the contrast paints massively. As I said, since the last video, contrast paints have come out and they've helped massively. They sped up painting time astronomically, so the time it took me to paint this one versus the time it took me to paint the old one, it's just night and day. Now we're going to use Agorist Dunes, and this is going to go all over the skulls and the bandages all over this model. Why this model has bandages, I don't know. I like to think they're like grips, but sometimes I just call them bandages. So yes, this is one of the contrast steps we're going to use here, and this, you don't really have to highlight too much with this, or if you do, you probably have to get away with one highlight step. Now we're going to use Snakebite Leather, and this is going to do all those leather straps we did before. And Snakebite Leather is a colour I really enjoy. It does leather so nicely, and I think if you added the extra detail in afterwards, it would look phenomenal. But it's a good initial starting point, and for table ready stuff, this stuff is just incredible. So out of all the contrast paints, this is one of the ones I highly recommend the most. Now we're coming back in with Bugman's Glow, and we're highlighting up the skin, so we're just putting that base layer back on, and we're avoiding all the recessed areas so we keep the shade in there. Now we're coming in with Cadian Flesh Tone, and this is just going to highlight all the skin areas again, so just go for the highest edges, the highest areas. This is not a massively light skinned beast, so yeah, you don't have to go full on with this, so where you feel appropriate, but yeah, this is the next highlighting step with skin. Now we're going to use Watercolors Black Silver, and this is going to coat all the metal areas of the model. Now, it's actually surprisingly less than I initially thought there was. This model has a lot of armor on it, but not a lot of metal showing areas. So we're just going with the chainmail, some of the links and chains and hoops are all over the body, and the main blade as well. Any kind of buckles and bandings as well, but there's not as many as you would think with this model. Now we're going to come in with Watercolors Pewter, and this is going to be the highlight for that black silver that we put on just before. So yeah, if you know how to highlight this, all you got to do is, again, highlight with this. Relatively simple steps here. There's nothing overly strenuous about this, so just take your time, work around it. There's more hoops and rings on it than you would think, but there's not so many that it's overly obvious. Now we're going to use contrast wildwood, and this is going to paint the stick. I was going to say staff or spear, but it's not. It's actually like a stick that they've just jammed a metal thing onto. So yeah, paint his stick with contrast wildwood. Again, how you use contrast paints, put them on pretty thick, pretty heavy, and yeah, there you go. Now we're going to use Steel Legion Drab, and this is a base coat for all the little horns and teeth on the model. Again, nothing strenuous here, just be careful because you've put some work now into the other areas of the model, so you don't want to get this over that, because if you can, you don't want to have to tidy up. So just take your time, be careful, and get this in the right areas. Now we're going to use Xandru Dust, and this is going to be the highlight for the Steel Legion Drab. Basically put it all over the same areas where you put the Steel Legion Drab, however just leave the recessed areas. And again, this is an area where you want to be a bit more careful. You don't want to have to go back and tidy this up, because otherwise you've got to do 3 or 4 extra steps on another area. So at this point, start being careful with the model, because you don't want to get this bit wrong. Okay, now we're going to use Pallet Witch Flesh and mix that with Xandru Dust to give our next highlight step. So again, being very careful here, we just want to go for those higher edges and those higher points. We still leave the transition between the Steel Legion and the Xandru Dust, and then we create this next step, so we start getting some really nice highlights and shades. Each subsequent layer as well, I add more and more Pallet Witch Flesh into the mix, so we get a higher and a higher transition period. Now coming with Cadian Flesh Tone, and I'm going to paint all the Orc skin. Now this is a bit which was weird. I tried to do the reverse of some advice I gave Spud way back when about using skin tones to highlight greens, and I decided, okay, well, what happens if I try a base tone of skin color and then highlight that with green, or shade that with green, and yeah, and then I realized this horrendous gap, and I was not happy with it, so I went in and filled it with plastic putty. Then I came back in with Pewter just to do a light dry brush over the metal areas as well, to get a little bit more of a highlight on them if I could. Now we're going to use Black Templar, and this is going to paint his hair. Again, contrast, so do what contrast do, put it on thick, put it on heavy, and it will do the rest. Then we're going to use Blood Angel's Red, and we're going to paint the inside of his gob. It is very hard to film this because it's the inside of his gob. If anything, I would have painted this beforehand, I probably should have. And then I decided I was going to wash it as well. Now, I don't know if this is a good step. I'm kind of experimenting here, so yeah, up to you if you want to follow this bit. But there is something to be said. When you're painting, try experimenting every now and again. You're not going to learn unless you try it. So I tried to salvage my disaster by painting in green. However, I left a little bit of the flesh tones showing from underneath. It did help a little bit. However, I think this would have been better served if I'd stuck to my original concept of base with green, then highlight with flesh. It kind of works a little bit better with the face because some of the pinky fleshy tones in the recesses looks quite cool. However, yeah, I think it could be done a more efficient way. Then using mint green we used to highlight. Now on my original video I highlighted up a little bit more than this. However, again, one of those concepts and things of age of it's not necessary. On a lot of things you don't need to go to that level, and since this is going to blend in with a gigantic army, there's no real need to go to that high level if, well, you can do, I'm not stopping you by any means, but when you're doing an army like that, I don't really feel there's a need. You could just get away with that and that wouldn't be a problem. Now we're going to use XV88 and we're going to paint his teeth. And again, this is one of those ones where you really don't want to muck up, so take your time, be careful, and yeah, also his fingernails, because otherwise it does look rather weird, but I would say like weird kind of mucky fingernails, but no, I guess that was true for an orc. Then we highlight with Xandru Dust, and I decided to paint his eyes for some reason. I can't tell you why I did that. Oh, that's why, because I've started the highlight of the white. I also decided to highlight some of the bandages. Again, I don't really feel this is a necessary requirement. However, it does add a little bit of an extra pop to the model. Now we're going to use watercolor red. Pick a red, to be honest with you. It doesn't have to be this one. And we're just going to paint his eyeballs red. And we're going to paint the eyeballs of the thing white as well. And then we're going to use a black just to create the pupil. If you know a way of doing eyeballs easy, do that. Then we're going to use AK Interactive's terrain ready stuff. So if you want to get hold of this stuff, there'll be a link below to Firestorm Games where you can purchase it, and it helps the channel. It gives a little bit of kickback to me. But yes, here is some handy stuff that you can put on, and it doesn't look as weird as sand. Now we're going to turn to Keep Gaming Scenics, and we're going to put on their tufts onto the base. Now, if you are really not certain about this, glue these things on. But I find if you take them off and then push them down with the reverse end of a brush, they stick pretty well. Now, it doesn't look quite right, so what we're going to do is we're going to shade the tufts. This helps actually blend them into the environment a little bit more, so we get a nice kind of transition. They don't look like they've just been glued on, they look like they actually have some sort of substance in the world. So I know it seems weird, but trust me, it does look cool. And then the glorious part of painting the rim of the base. So whatever colour is your preference, go with that, but this is the subtle, smooth part which I love more than anything else, because you know it's the end. And here's our finished model. Now, up to you. You can compare whether or not it holds up to the old one. I think the quality is better. Is the paint job as good? I'd actually probably say no. But then again, I've learned things since then, and I understand now I don't need to go that far with everything. This will look good enough. This is easily tabletop ready, if not a little bit higher, possibly. And I'm happy with it. This is going to join a big load of orcs that has been a project of mine for a long time. Good old 2020 has enabled us to stay at home a lot, so this was one of my projects that I wanted to get out of the way. So here is some clips of my Iron Jawz army. See what you think. It's a monstrous army. If you're interested in it, drop us a comment below and we can have a chat about whether or not it's something you're after. If not, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been fun, and this is another project for 2020 done and dusted. So yeah, on to the next one. Many more to come, and we've all got that pile of shame. 2020 is definitely hacking into our pile of shame here, so I'll see what else we can get completed in the age of 2021. Now, everyone, thank you very much for watching. It's been awesome. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. If you like the video, please hit the like, share, subscribe, all of that jazz. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you do, that's appreciated. If you are looking for some hobby materials, there is a link to Firestorm Games below. It's an affiliate link, so anything you purchase through that link gives a little bit of a kickback to me as well, and it helps me out as well. And for everyone else, if you don't know, I'm part of the Chilling Wargamers, and we stream every Thursday about 8 PM British time, so if you fancy coming along and chatting some nonsense for about an hour or so, please check us out over there. So until next time, everyone, be good, be safe, and I shall see you then. Till then, bye bye.